What?
All right, everyone, welcome. Welcome to Pro-Family Lobby Day here at the State House. My name is Daniel Brayton. I'm the Director of Operations for Renew Mass Coalition, formerly Coalition for Marriage and Family. We've partnered with our sister organization, Mass Family Institute today. Andrew Becker is the president. We'll be hearing from him in a minute. To sponsor this Pro-Family Lobby Day. Renew Mass Coalition will help elect several of the reps that you'll hear from today. They're believers in pro-family, traditional marriage, and pro-family values. They will come speaking to you about a few of the issues that you'll be hearing about today. We have a pretty full day for you. You'll be hearing briefs on a few of the bills that you'll be then going and lobbying your representatives on. Like I said, we help get them here, and then MFI kind of takes over and guides them and kind of lobbies them, I think, on issues, pro-family issues, and makes them aware of what's going on. And helps do that. We have Dave DeCoste was here first. Dave is one of the newest Republican representatives from Norwell.
I'll be brief. I am always brief. Good guy to start, better guy to end though. I'm Dave DeCoste. I represent the 5th Permanent District, which is Norwalk, Hanover, and Rockland. I cover Jeff Deal's east flank now, so he has some allies down the South Shore. Hopefully another 2 years we'll have to do more. But Jeff, I guess briefly I'll tell you where I am. I suppose just tell you where I am. I was fortunate enough to be Leader Jones assigned to things I need to be on regarding issues critical to my district, most specifically and uniquely down where we are 40B. So I'm on the Housing Committee, the Veterans Committee, which by background I'm a retired Army officer, it kind of lends itself, and then also the Public Service Committee, which oddly enough is bubbled up as a little bit of an opportunity because that has to do with veterans preference and civil service. The civil service system is broke, and the good news is and everybody in all parties agree on that. So the development of a good civil service system will mean a professional workforce for state government. And that's something that I've kind of identified that maybe there's a Republican who ought to be working on it, and maybe it'll be me. So that is something I will be doing. As always, I want to say I'm most opposed to this because it's important, and your support is critical. Because in addition, it was kind of an under-the-radar candidate. This is not a criticism of the state party, and I hope they picked up on what was going on. But thanks to you folks, and Chanel, and Jeff, and Shauna, who did come up and throw some legal support. Also the folks from the National Rifle Association, and the Right to Life people, and the NFIB and Chamber of Commerce who gave a great deal of quiet support, and the Park people, the anti-gun which identified me very late, but I know they were also doing some more pacifism, of course. Thanks to all of you folks in the association questions. Okay, do you have any questions for me? But I don't like to take anything dead here. I will be back if any of you do have questions. Thank you.
We are really grateful for all the reps that have giving their time to stop by today. This is budget week for them, and they're literally debating hundreds of amendments over the next couple of days. Thousands. But what better time for us to be here to make sure our issues, our pro-life, pro-family issues, stay at the forefront of their minds in this country. So it's really a great time and a great week to be here. I think, Jeff, you want to come and say Representative Jeff Deal from Whitman.
Now it's working. All right. Thanks for having me. And you guys are a special group because you're up here, you're not paid to be up here, you're doing this out of the love of what you believe in and the passion that you have for that. So, I have to be up here to sit through 3 days now of thousands of votes. And, I chose to do that because I believe at one point, and still do, that we in government can make a difference. And in this case, we should be making a difference for families. Just tell you my road. I'm from Whitman. married, 2 kids, 13 and 8 are my girls, they're great. But my wife had a miscarriage back when we first tried to have kids. Some people don't want to talk about that nowadays. It seems like you can talk about it a little more openly. That was one of those moments where you say to yourself, as a young married couple, life is so delicate, so precious, that when it's finally given to you, our first daughter, you want to do anything and everything to protect her. I remember when I left the hospital, I drove my car probably 5 miles an hour out of that garage, and I don't know, all the way home. And I still am like that with her to this day, just in different ways. I'm sort of a stalker as a parent, right? But life is given to us, and it's our opportunity to do what we can with it. You guys are helping protect future lives in what you're trying to do right now. And that's what we need to do, especially in Massachusetts, where it's very difficult, and it's going to be a fight that's going to go on for, I think, too long. But I think we can win it in the long term. So I guess I'm just not going to say too much more today, but I just want to thank you for what you're doing, because you're really the army that makes this happen by putting other legislators that don't feel maybe the same way, or who do, and just need to know that there are people behind them that will support them when it comes time. So thank you for doing what you're doing today. I know it's not just today, it's been days in the past, it's going to be days in the future. Your work really is what makes it possible for us to get into the legislature and to make a difference at some point. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jeff. Next, we have Representative Poirier of North Attleboro.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Thank you all for making the trip up here to the State House. I know that isn't always an easy job. I'm serving my 9th term here in the State House, representing my district. And I have always been involved with the Mass Family Institute and the good work that they do, and continue to be. I have filed this session 5 bills pertaining to pro-life issues. And I believe that there's one in particular that they've asked me to highlight. So I will talk about that one. It's House Bill 2039, and it is an act to advance the safety of women seeking to terminate a pregnancy. There are at least 16 unlicensed abortion facilities operating in Massachusetts. These facilities are not regulated or inspected as medical facilities that would meet the legal definition of a clinic. Laura Hope Smith, who many of you may have heard of, died in such a facility while undergoing an abortion. This bill would further clarify the definition of a clinic that is established or maintained for the purpose of performing, and does perform more than 10 abortions per year. I met actually several times with Laura's mother. She flew up here, she lives in the South, and she's very passionate about seeing that this does not happen to any other women. And in fact, we do more regulation around getting your ears pierced than we do having an abortion. And I've filed some other issues. I left copies of the bills here if you wish to see them. The next one, which is House Bill 1541, which is women's right to know. And I believe very much that had this bill been in place, that Laura would not have died, because this would provide a pamphlet of information prepared by an unbiased group, such as the Public Health Department, which would provide information to any women who are seeking abortion so that they would know what the medical effects would be on them, long-term and otherwise, which many young women really don't even think about that. Many young women go to abortion clinics at the urging of someone else in their life and really not of their own choosing many times. And once having been given the information, we asked that they have a 24-hour period before they would come back for the procedure. The next one is House Bill 1550, which is an act relative to unborn children and would prohibit abortions after 20 weeks. All medical and biological indicators suggest unborn children are feeling pain by 20 weeks. The next is House 1547, which is an act relative to sex selection in pregnancy. So if the individual seeking the abortion is doing so because of the undesirable sex of the child they are carrying, this would prevent a physician from intentionally performing the abortion with the knowledge that the mother is seeking it solely on the sex. And the last one is House 466, which is an act requiring parental consent on sex education in public schools. I had the opportunity at one point in my career to meet a mother whose 10-year-old daughter was given a test on sex education. And she testified before a hearing here in the State House, and she brought a copy of the test with her. And she shared it with me and others. And I was absolutely horrified that a 10-year-old girl would be subjected to the questions on this test. And the mother had not been notified that the child was being taught the particular curriculum that was designed in that school. And she also was horrified. So, this bill would ask that any public school that is going to teach a sex education class be required to share the curriculum with the parents. I believe it's at least a week or two prior to the class beginning. And that the parent, instead of opting out of the class, would have to opt into the class. I feel in many cases, as happened in the case I just told you about, that the parent somehow misses the notice that the class is going to take place, and the child ends up participating by default because the parent had no knowledge of it. So I think it's very important that they be not only told it's going to take place, but they be informed about what is going to be taught, because after all, parents are the first teachers of their children. And I believe at grade level, not all children have the same level of maturity. Some of them are able to absorb the material and some are not. So a parent knows their child best, and they should be the ultimate deciders. So I will conclude by saying I appreciate the fact that you all are involved in these issues, because they're very important. And it's important that your voices are heard all across the Commonwealth, so that people know what's happening, and they know that there are people here, some of whom you've heard from already this morning, that believe as you do. And we're not crazy. As we're portrayed many times, we're very reasonable people. And we just believe that people have the right to know what they're getting themselves into. And many times they just don't have the information. So keep up your good work and continue to spread the word. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Poirier. We really appreciate your continued, long-standing, principled stand for the sanctity of life here on Beacon Hill. We know it's not easy. I was here just less than a year ago at a joint press conference between the then Governor and Attorney General, hand in hand with Planned Parenthood and NARAL, Pro-Choice America, and it really demonstrated the overwhelming influence and power that the abortion movement has right here in Beacon Hill. So we appreciate your stand. We know it's not easy. My name is Andrew Beckwith. I'm the president of the Mass Family Institute. Speaking of heroes for the life movement, we also have my predecessor, President Emeritus, Colonel Chris Mino, who's in the house this morning, as well as Eva Murphy with Massachusetts Citizens for Life, who also advocates for life. I'd like to introduce Representative Kevin Kuros this morning, who's got a hearing at 11, so I want to get him in and let him speak to you. Another advocate for life here in Beacon Hill.
Andrew, thank you. Morning, everybody. Come on. Great to see you here. A lot of friendly, familiar faces. We've gotten to know each other over the past several years. This is my third term in the legislature. I'm a very happily married parent of two fantastic teenagers, and try to instill in my kids just kind of a good moral basis. You never know how teenagers are going to react, but all you can do is try to provide the best foundation and upbringing possible, and trust that they're going to use good judgment as they move forward through their lives. I want to talk very quickly just about two things. First, I mentioned this is my third term. Each of those 3 terms, I've either sponsored or co-sponsored with Rep. Poirier a bill that would ban partial birth abortions here in the Commonwealth. And you may ask, well, why do we need that? They're banned nationally. Well, 25 other states actually have similar legislation on the books, really as a safeguard, in case whatever the prevailing, I said whatever, like I'm from Massachusetts. I'm from Pennsylvania, holy cow. But whatever the prevailing administration is federally, may choose to enforce or not enforce that law. So we've tried to get one on the books here. Obviously it's a long shot, so I throw it up a Hail Mary at the end of a football game every time you bring pro-life legislation forward in the Commonwealth. But if you don't ask, the answer is no. So we have to keep asking, we have to keep pushing. So that's what we're doing there. I do want to share one other thing with you, and trying to underscore why it's important that you're here. During the budget debate, there's a lot of downtime. You're in the chamber, and it's hurry up and wait, waiting for amendments to be released and waiting for the vote to come up. So you do have quite some time just to socialize with the other members. And I had a conversation yesterday with one of, if not the most progressive members of the legislature, and who shall remain nameless, but maybe pull me aside, I can tell you who it is. We had a very interesting conversation about this point, the sanctity of life, which I did not expect to have this conversation with a very progressive member of the legislature. But her perspective, she was very much focused on end-of-life options. Now, I am convinced, even though we had the ballot question that defeated physician-assisted suicide, it's coming back again. I'm 100% convinced it's coming back again. But here was a progressive who found herself on the exact same side of this issue as I am on. And it kind of struck me a little surprisingly. So I asked her, I said, why, how do we end up on the same side of this issue? And she said, we spend so much time focused on medicine and providing a good quality of life for people and prolonging their lives. And we're so focused, especially in this state, on science and medicine and everything else. And the whole mantra of physicians is first do no harm. And she said, I don't think this is the right thing that we should be focusing our medical efforts on. And so it's a perspective I hadn't really thought of it. It's very personal for me. My mom spent the last month of her life in a hospice. I've told this story in this session before. And when I first got the phone call from my father telling me he could no longer take care of my mom and he was going to put her in a hospice that was very upset. You've thrown in the towel, Dad. You've given up. Don't give up on Mom, the whole bit. But having spent the last 8 days of her life with her in the hospice and seeing the beauty and the warmth of the care that she received, first of all, I underscored that my dad was right. Sometimes your dad does know more than you. And you have to admit that even as an adult sometimes. But he absolutely was right on that decision. But the second thing is, it kind of underscored and solidified my sense that having a physician help you with the end-of-life decision is absolutely the wrong course to take. You know, my mom passed in a very warm, loving, caring, spiritual environment. You know, there were ministers, sometimes priests, sometimes Protestant ministers visiting the hospice literally every single day. They would offer counseling, words of wisdom, and just a calming presence. You know, and it was as warm of a end-of-life experience as I think it's possible to encounter. So don't give up the battle, but the message I'm trying to leave is don't be afraid to ask people who you think may be on opposite sides of any one of these issues where they stand. Don't assume anything, because that conversation I had in the chamber yesterday was pretty eye-opening for me. So I want to thank you. I do need to get down to a committee hearing, but thank you for your presence today. Please stop by, see as many legislators as possible, leave the information, but also try to grab a minute or two with them if you can. And other than that, really appreciate your efforts on everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, we're going to welcome Representative McKenna from Webster, and he's actually the one who secured this room for us, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's always good to be here. I just want to echo some of the things that have been said by those who spoke before me, and also point out Rep. Betty Poirier, who was here. In addition to those bills that she talked about, is also a champion for victims of sexual abuse and for clarifying and enforcing laws around sex offenders here in Massachusetts. So that's another very important issue that she really is a champion for, so I want to applaud her for that. But as far as the role of these great organizations, MFI and Family Focus, they're really two roles. It's education and then it's getting people elected. And education goes two ways, because so much of what happens in government is just veiled, it's hidden, people don't see it. It's executive policy, it's regulatory policy, it's things that the Commissioner of Education passes down without anyone knowing. And it's these organizations that make sure that these things see the light of day, that get public awareness, and that you know what's going on. Without that education, I'm really scared to think what the government would do. And then on the other side, it's educating the legislators as to where you guys stand, where the public stands, what's important to you, where you stand on the issues, and making sure that your message gets back to those reps who may not be with us, to let them, as I think it was Jeff said, let them know that they've got the backup, they've got the support to take a strong stand on family values here in Massachusetts, which isn't always an easy thing. So to hear from you and to know that you've got our back is tremendously important. But that's all kind of a moot point if we don't have people taking up the flag in elected office. So getting people elected is really very important, and I owe my election certainly to organizations like yourself, so thank you very much for that, and certainly continue to support. And I want to touch on the sanctity of life issue, similar to what Kevin was saying, and I've had this conversation regarding abortion with a number of people. And my encouragement to you is to don't let the conversation turn away from the sanctity of life to what I believe is a false argument on a woman's rights. We all agree women have the utmost right to do whatever they want with their bodies, but not when another life is involved. And that definition of where the life begins is where the difference is. I don't think anyone in this building thinks it's okay to kill babies, obviously. The difference is where that line becomes. And I had the privilege of being at a fundraiser for Visitation House in Worcester a few weeks ago, and hear from someone who used to work at Planned Parenthood. And she described a story where she had assisted with an abortion and saw the ultrasound and saw a baby flinch when it was prodded with the tongs in an abortion, and saw that that life was there. And that changed her mind. So when you understand that opinions can change. As Kevin said, don't pre-assume what you think someone's beliefs are or where you think they stand, and understand that we've got to continue to advocate for the life and turn the argument back to that which is the core, is the life, not the false conversation on a woman doing, you know, what her right is, because I think that takes away from the life that she also carries. So just continue that fight, as discouraging as it can be at times, and again, thank you so much for all of your support. So I now want to hand it off to a good colleague of mine, Mark Lombardo, who's joined us here. Okay, I'm gonna not do that at all. I'm gonna introduce Tim Whalen, good colleague from the Cave.
Thank you, Joseph, my classmate. Folks, I only have a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to come up here and introduce myself to you, and thank you for coming up here to the State House. I am a freshman legislator, so I don't exactly have a great body of work that I can fall back on just yet. So, but I come from Cape Cod. I'm originally from Worcester, and I represent the 1st Barnstable District. And I'm proud to stand here in front of you and say that I took a seat that was formerly a Democrat seat and returned it to the Republican Party. Through a lot of hard work, a lot of my fellow legislators, a lot of organizations such as yours, all contributed to my electoral success, and I want to thank every one of you for continuing to support us as we move forward. And I look over here and I just noticed my good friend Agatha Bodwell from down in Cape Cod as well. Barnstable County, the greatest little county in Massachusetts, right? Everyone? No? One thing that I was looking through your packet, one of the things that I hadn't heard mentioned that I just wanted to bring up that I so strongly support you on is your approach to the Common Core standards. My wife is an educator. She teaches in the Barnstable Public Schools. My father was a school teacher. My sister's a school teacher. Basically, everybody in my family was either a school teacher or a cop. I was a cop. I'm a former state trooper. Kind of hard to tell by looking at me, right? I don't play the part at all. I'm not out of central casting. Well, probably the best way that I can describe the stress that our educators are under right now is when my wife told me that there was, she felt almost like she was breaking a law one day when she took her class outside during the spring after a hot winter a couple of years ago, just to take them around and walk around the periphery of the school and look at nature and all of its abundant glory as we see it in the spring. And she told me, she said, I hope I don't get in trouble because it wasn't on the curriculum for that day. And then she proceeded to explain to me about how tightly packed the curriculum is with the testing standards that they have right now under MCAS, and how they're going to be under further load with Common Core and the PARC testing that's going to be coming up. Dug a little bit deeper and found out all the stress that this is putting our school districts under, where the technological improvements and the unfunded mandates that come along with it that are crushing our public schools. At the end of the day, what I trust, being someone who had the bread put on his table from the cradle to the grave, hopefully, cradle to the grave by a public school teacher, I trust the teacher. I trust the teacher to control their own classroom. When I was in school, my teachers controlled their own curriculum, and I trust the teachers to run their curriculum in all of their creative glory, and I think that we have to get the government out of mandating what needs to be taught to our children in the classroom. So, I went a couple minutes longer than I planned on, because I have to run down to Chambers, but I want to thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to come here and speak to you wonderful folks. Agatha, it's always so nice to see you. This woman is the best. She's absolutely the very best. And I'll pass the microphone off, and thank you folks again very much for coming up here and lobbying your legislature.
Good morning, my name is Jonathan Alexander. I'm legal counsel for Massachusetts Family Institute. I'm going to speak quickly on parental rights. If you're in this room today, you are either personally involved in or at least heard the heart-wrenching story of Justina Peltier. Justina was a 14-year-old girl who was taken away from her parents by the Department of Children and Families in Boston's Children's Hospital. Ultimately, the story has a good conclusion, in part from the work that we did at Massachusetts Family Institute, as well as many of the pro-life and pro-family legislators that have spoken to you, and Representative Mark Lombardo, who will speak to you right after this. But the backstory is important to remember, is when you are speaking to your legislators, these are the things that you want to tie into. The reason for a lot of the laws and bills that we sponsor are because they have real persons involved in them and will affect our everyday communities and our everyday families. So Justina was 14 years old when she was taken away. She was brought by her parents to a doctor at Tufts University Medical Center. The reason for that was for her to get treatment for what was a gastrointestinal disorder that she had. Her internal organs were browning out. And that was the diagnosis that the doctor from Tufts University placed on her, the diagnosis, and as well put a course of treatment in play that both her parents, and the doctor agreed would be the best course of treatment to help with this pathology. However, the doctor sought as well to bring her over to a colleague of his at Boston's Children's Hospital. So he sent Justina and her parents over to Boston's Children's Hospital. This is where the story gets frightening, and we just pay attention here. Boston's Children's Hospital had a team of doctors and interns that intercepted Justina and effectively said that this pathology, that this disorder, this gastrointestinal disorder that she was diagnosed with, wasn't really what she was sick with. Rather, it was something in her head, something called somatophyll, effectively saying she was making up these diseases. And not only that, saying that it was because of allegations of abuse from her parents that she was suffering from these diseases. So they then went and got, through the Department of Children Services, the authority to remove Justina from her parents and have her held in custody at the Boston Children's Hospital in the psychiatric ward. Over a period of 15 months, Justina was separated from her mother and father. They were only allowed to visit her for 1 hour in a week, and during that time there would be a state police that was watching. They were only allowed 45 minutes to speak with her over the phone. Thankfully, through the intervention of Massachusetts Family Institute, of Liberty Council, the national organization, and the representatives that are here today, the story ended well. Justina was ultimately returned back to her parents. However, the nightmare continues for all of us who are parents in this room when we think that this can happen again, unless there is strong legislation that puts an end to these sort of practices. Representative Lombardo is going to come up and share some of the details of what is called an act titled Justina's Law. We named it after her in order to alert the folks that are signing off on this bill and will ultimately vote on this bill, the personal context that led up to this bill being signed. So I'm going to invite Representative Lombardo to speak on the details of how Justina's Law will put an end to these practices.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Lombardo. I'm the representative from the town of Billerica. And I'm very pleased to be here, and I want to thank you all for coming out and having your voice heard and your activism today here in the State House, because it's truly important. You know, last year, a lot of my time and energy went into the Justina Pelletier situation. And I remember watching the story hit the news, and I called up Jim Lyons, representative from Andover, and I said, Jim, we've got to do something about this. This is unbelievable. And you know, the first question everyone asked was, are these parents from the Pelletiers, what's wrong with them? Are they nuts? We got to be really careful we don't step into a grenade. And we did our homework, and we made sure that the story was truly what it appeared to be, and it was. It was an extreme abuse and overreach by state governments into the Pelletier family's life and care of their child. And personally, as a father of two, a 6- and a 5-year-old, this struck me as to, what if I brought my child to the hospital and was working on a course of treatment with my doctor, and another medical facility didn't like it and disagreed and said that I was abusing my child and took my child away from me. I can tell you that having watched the Pelletier family, God bless them for the patience they showed. I do not think that I could have had the patience, the restraint that they showed during this situation. And so, Jim Lyons and I spearheaded the effort to really bring Justina's case to the light and try to get the legislature to intervene, more importantly, get the administration to act. And dealing with the Patrick administration was no easy task. The air of arrogance from that administration about they always knew what was right, they would tell us what's best for us, continued right into the Pelletier case. And it took relentless persistence on our behalf to make some noise. And so it took many months, but we got Justina back to her family. We were part of the solution. We weren't the solution. We were part of it. We took this up as a rally cry. Just yesterday in the House, Jim Lyons had an amendment passed that would examine the Pelletier case as to how much money DCF spent on this case, examined the way they came to the decision to take Justina away from her family, and how many other children are being treated under this 51A clause, and what this criteria is made around that, because we want to make sure this doesn't happen to any other family ever again. And I have an amendment and Justina's bill that I filed that we hopefully call Justina's Law someday. It stipulates that if you were working with a medical professional in good faith, following a course of treatment, that no other medical facility in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts cannot step in and medical abuse on your right as a parent to treat your child. And we're not talking about parents being reckless and not bringing their children to the doctor. We're talking about parents working with medical physicians and personnel. I mean, that just seems common sense. But that's not on the books today. That is literally not on the books. So my hope, well, it may not be today, and it may not be tomorrow, but at some point in this legislative session is to get Justina's bill, become Justina's Law, and to make sure that we become strong advocates for parents' rights here in the Commonwealth. So thank you so much for being here. Yes?
So I think the Justina Pelletier law is really needed, and I hope that it passes, to give them some additional comfort and healing, as well as to protect other parents against the medical abuse. But the legislature, people on the committee investigating DCF, have received numerous other complaints against DCF that have nothing to do with medical referrals. Some dealing with the fact that children who are from Christian or Judeo-Christian or conservative homes are losing their children to DCF because of their child's sexual identity issues. DCF currently is actively seeking LGBT parents for fostering and adopting children. They're actively screening out parents who have religious or conservative views. They're not allowing them to be parents, foster parents or adoptive parents, if they have those views, because of some kids have sexual identity issues. But what concerns me the most is that children are being taken care of. I learned of 2 more families this past couple of weeks where DCF is involved only because the DCF sees those kind of views for parents as being emotionally abusive, when in fact children develop sexual identity issues because of traumas during childhood. What is the legislature doing to protect the parental rights of those parents and protect those children who are being told that their parents are haters and homophobes and are being removed from loving families?
Thank you. And I think what your question highlights is greater problems at DCF, right? And I think many in the legislature are aware of this. We're hoping that the amendments passed in the House and will go through the Senate to begin to look at DCF's practices. We'll go through. There's bigger problems there. What I'm hopeful is that the new administration is bringing a fresh set of eyes on the practices of DCF, top to bottom, throughout all of their different aspects of their office. There is no doubt that, in my opinion, that if you come from a traditional conservative background, that you are targeting Massachusetts, and you're not welcomed in some respects. And that needs to change. And I think it's advocates like myself, Rep. Lyons, and many of the reps you've heard today will continue to be a voice for those who believe in family values. So, thank you for the question and concern. Thank you all for being here today.
What was that bill number?
Mark?
Lombardo?
Where's the bill number? Where's the bill number? I'm not sure the exact bill number, I just do, so we can find out. 1469.
1469. Great.
Thanks, Mark. I now have the privilege of introducing one of Renew Mass Coalition's newest partners, and also the Director of Catholic Citizenship, Agatha Bodwell, from the Cape, who's going to give you a brief on Common Core and Park.
Thank you very much. drag it is coming into Boston, and I really appreciate your giving up this day. I'm really excited to be the newest member of the Coalition for Marriage and Family, and extremely excited that they are taking on Common Core and opposing it as well. I myself, as a parent, have been researching it for the last couple of years since I first heard of it. And, you know, when I go out, my husband says, don't get her started on that, because I could talk about it for hours, but I'm going to try to stick to the basics. And just in case I forget, I did put out a whole table worth of information and articles if you want to find out more about Common Core when I'm done, or if you don't believe me, because everything I've got is, everything I say is from direct resources. Okay, so basically, Common Core is the perfect marriage of big business, big labor, and big government. They were not developed by the states, which is something that you'll hear, Common Core state standards. And the reason, if you ever wondered why do they push that so much, it's because if it wasn't developed by the states, it would be illegal and unconstitutional. So that's why they say they're state standards, even though they technically were developed by a nonprofit organization that was paid for by the Gates Foundation. So there's your big business in it. And he, at the end of the process, actually has a lot of money to gain, because the ultimate goal is to get education completely online. And the other thing is, when the states took the Common Core, the federal government was involved because it was called the Race to the Top application. So we had states that were in 2010 in financial crises, and so they were willing to take any money the federal government was willing to give them, and basically sold our kids for. Massachusetts ended up with, I think, about $200 million, which comes out to 33 cents over 4 years, 33 cents a day per child. So it's really not that much, and it's very much, like Representative Whalen said, another unfunded mandate. Gates money, I know a lot of people want to say that when you talk about the Gates Foundation, it's a conspiracy theory, but actually, Gates money flows from conception to development to implementation to enforcement to discrediting opponents. The Gates Foundation has already spent over $200 million, and this is easily discovered if you go to the Gates Foundation website, to their grant section. They will tell you who's received grants. So in the beginning, the Gates Foundation donated money to Achieve, which is a private organization that's not subject to any sunshine laws, so we can't find anything out about how these standards were created. Then they gave money to a bunch of organizations, including the PTO, to promote Common Core. So I have a list of organizations. In Massachusetts, the people that are coming out for Common Core are the Rennie Foundation, the Massachusetts Business and Education Alliance, Teach Plus, and yesterday I heard from the Stand for Children organization. And if you look any of them up, they have received, Stand for Children, over $8 million to promote Common Core. So it's very difficult when you have a teacher from Teach Plus or Stand for America go in front of the Board of Education in Massachusetts and say how great the park assessment was. And I'm just a parent, I've got no money behind me. And they've got all the credentials, but then you also look and you say, how can they possibly be neutral about this? So that's one of the things. Common Core is also not legal. It breaks 3 federal laws: the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, the General Education Provisions Act Public Law, and the DOE Organization Act. I'm not going to get into the details on that, but the federal government basically should have nothing to do whatsoever with our curriculum. And Massachusetts in particular does lower its standards. In the original Race to the Top application, Massachusetts did not choose to move to the Common Core standards. So in the first application, we did not check the box for the Common Core standards. And we got a big old rejection notice. Well, sorry, you're at the bottom of the list, you're probably not going to get the money. In the second round of applications, we did choose that we would switch to Common Core standards. So that tells me that we knew from the beginning this was not as good as our standards. We are privileged in Massachusetts to have some of the foremost experts on education, and Dr. Sandra Stotsky and Jamie Gass is from the Pioneer Institute. He's written many studies about Common Core. They have taken it upon themselves to go talk to people all over the state, and actually they do travel to other states and testify in front of other legislatures, but they can go into the specifics about the Common Core standards and how they are much lower than our previous standards. The math in particular slows down progression by 2 years. It's not, you know, if you want to go into a STEM field, which is really popular right now, especially in Massachusetts, you can't do it. You can't go through the Common Core math standards and then get into a college to become an engineer or a mathematician or a software developer or anything like that. In addition, the math architect of the standards, Dr. Jason Zimba, has admitted in a public hearing that when they say college and career ready, they mean a non-selective college, like a 2-year community college. I don't think Massachusetts parents are interested in that at all. Oh, here's a great example. You probably hear surrounding Common Core that the standards are rigorous. That's the new buzzword of education today. Everybody wants everything to be rigorous. Well, as Sandra, Dr. Stotsky will tell you, they're not rigorous. They're confusing, convoluted, and sometimes baffling. And they, other teachers will tell you, when you introduce a new subject to a child, you introduce it the most simplest way so that they can understand it and feel success, and then you move on to more difficult concepts. And Common Core seems to have this completely backwards. If there's parents here and you've seen your kids' math homework and they come home and it takes 50 steps to do what used to take us when we went to school 2 or 3 steps, that's just a perfect example. I'm going to read you an example of a Common Core standard, and this is not in math or ELA, but it's in the science standards, which has already been written, and I'm sure we'll be fighting that next year. But listen to this standard and tell me what grade you think this is for. The cross-cutting concepts of patterns, cause and effect, systems and system models, interdependence of science, engineering, and technology, and influence of engineering, technology, and science on society and the natural world are called out as organizing concepts for these disciplinary core ideas. Any guesses on a grade? Those are kindergarten standards. So it's interesting. What I'm finding, what I'm learning is that they make the standards very convoluted and complex in the early years, and then really simple in the older years. For example, in the ELA, they got classic literature by 50%. So they're replacing classic literature with informational texts, which, as far as I'm concerned, a textbook is an informational text. They're already reading informational texts. So they're replacing classic literature, which has been proven to increase vocabulary, writing skills, reading skills, and that brings me to another issue with Common Core, is that it's never actually been tested in one classroom. So this is a grand experiment. Even Bill Gates himself says, we're not going to know for 10 years if this is going to work or not. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to risk my child's future for this experiment. One of the most troubling things that I learned about it is that some of the standards, even in the younger ages, are developmentally inappropriate. For example, young children's brains are not physically developed for abstract thinking. And there are many standards in the younger grades that require abstract thinking. So now you are requiring children to do something they're not capable of, and you're testing them to do something they're not capable of. And what happens is they feel they're stupid, and they internalize that, and that never goes away. So that's really troubling to me, and I think a lot of parents of small children. We don't even have any idea what kind of damage we're doing. One of the articles I have on the table is from a New York social worker. New York is a few years ahead of us on Common Core. And she talks about the different cases that she has of kids that are stressed out over Common Core, the anxiety disorders, the self-mutilation, suicide, suicidal kids. It's it's really scary, and I hope that Massachusetts does not go in that direction. I want to open it up to questions because I could go on for hours.
I understand one of our unexpected allies in the fight is the Mass Teachers Association. Could you address a little bit of why, and is that of value to us?
Excellent question, great point. Yes, the Mass Teachers Association is against Common Core. I've had the privilege of speaking to many teachers. Like Representative Whalen said, the problem is that teachers are so afraid to speak out against this. They're fearing for their jobs. We have teachers that have come to us that have said they're retiring early because they don't want to teach. They don't want to teach under Common Core standards. And you know, I begged them to come out, but they're all worried about their retirement and their jobs and things like that. So that's why I'm glad the Mass Teachers Association is coming out against Common Core. That probably has a lot to do with the fact that the PARC assessment, which is the Common Core aligned assessment that they want to replace the MCAS, is being tied to teacher evaluations. And that's something very important, because what I've heard about PARC is that I just went to a public hearing yesterday, the first one in Fitchburg yesterday. The teachers are coming out, and superintendents and principals, and they're saying this material is 2 years over, over what they're supposed to be testing. So if you're testing 4th graders, you're giving them 6th grade reading material to base your questions on. So it's basically a setup for failure. The kids are going to fail, the teachers are going to fail, and I personally think that, it's a way to say, create another crisis in education where the federal government is going to have to come in and take over all of our schools. It's really about government control. In regards to today's meeting, another erosion of parents' rights and trying to break up families, the things that some of these classes are teaching, and especially the math. When you give your kid math homework and the parents can't help them, I feel like they're really going out of their way to make everything to separate parents from their kids and make the kids not only feel like they're stupid, but their parents are stupid, and the only smart people left are the teachers and the government.
492 going to Common Core.
Bill 492, is that to repeal Common Core or PARC testing?
I think that one is to repeal everything, to get out of Common Core altogether. Now let me tell you about PARC, because we're in a very critical situation right now. The governor has asked the new chairman of education to go around the state. So we've got 4 more. The first one was yesterday, public hearings, where teachers, parents, children, we're hoping to have some kids come talk about the test. They're looking for input because they're going to be taking a vote in November to either keep the MCAS or move to the PARC. And one of the problems with PARC is that they want to do the tests online, which I heard many stories yesterday about computer glitches. And then you're basically testing kids on their computer ability rather than their knowledge of the subject. Another problem that they're having in Rhode Island is they've gone on to online assessments, but also computer.
Oh my God.
Attention, please. The signal tone you have just heard indicates a report of an emergency in this building. Please walk to the nearest exit that leaves the building. Attention, please. The signal tone
Okay, we'll be back.